Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second career fair hosted by the NISS. And so today we are very honored to have our speakers from three universities. So we'll have Irina and Brandy from Texas A&M, and we'll have Robert from Emory University, and we'll have Martin from Cornell University. So we will have three sections in the section accordingly, and they will each introduce the hiring situation in their department and giving advice about how the junior people can look for jobs during this pandemic situation. So this is a very brief overview of this agenda, and we will have roughly 20 minutes for each speaker. I'll be the moderator, and then after the three talks, we will have 25 minutes for questions and answers. So for all the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box if you're allowed to, and I'll try to help the speakers see the questions and give the answers after the three talks. So thank you, and we look forward to the talks. So Irina and Brandy, please start sharing your screen. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is actually a joint 20 minutes between Irina and myself. I will start first with sort of giving a broad airplane picture about the situation at Texas A&M, and Irina will give a little bit more detailed overview of our hiring process this year. I came to Texas A&M from NSF. I was program officer in the last 2 years. And I would like to say a couple of words about status of statistics community, national community, and how that affects our hiring. Then I will say about tripods and tummies at Texas A&M. Can we go the next one? So when I arrived at NSF in fall of 2018, there was statistics at a Crossroads conference, workshop, that assembled about 60, 70 leaders of statistics nationally. The goal, it was organized by NSF. The goal was to develop a plan, vision for the field of statistics, to identify opportunities and challenges for the field, and to create vibrant community, maintain appropriate balance between subfields. The committee was Jim Berger, Shuminghan, David Madigan, Susan Murphy, John Wellner, and Bing Yu. Irina, the next one. And the major findings, of course, there was a white paper, and maybe some of you read this white paper, but the major findings, recommendations, was to emphasize practical relevance of our field of statistics, to deal with real-life problems, and to evolve with the science. Some of the emerging applications, precision health, statistics in the physical sciences. It was very hot at the time, quantum information science, maybe topological data analysis, and so on and so forth. And the training was also emphasized in the follow-up workshop that actually our new generation of statisticians should be trained in critical thinking, modeling, computation, and communication. I apologize for this small font of for this slide, but this slide is essentially a bar chart of the topics at NSF 2019 submission of the grant proposals. There was above 300 proposals. These are just regular statistics proposals with career proposals. And the top one is foundation of statistics. That is essentially, I would say, classical statistics. But the second one is statistical learning, and the fourth one is network. And the learning and networks would be dominant if they are together. So already in the topics of submission of the statistical proposals, we see shift toward the computation, toward the modern data analysis, networks, causal inference, and that kind of thing. Can we go for the next one? So at that time, it was noted that among the topics, networks, graphs, scalability, machine learning, artificial intelligence, causal inference, very new field, topological data analysis. Actually, it is between mathematics and statistics, mostly for the semi-supervised learning, for the essentially non-standard types of data. These are topics that are on the rise. Classical design of experiments, inference in the classical sense, classical decision theory are on the decline. Of course, not exactly true, because if these topics deal with the new type of data, big data, then they are very much of interest. Can we go for the next one? So this is reflected in our job ad. The department is interested in expertise in the broad area of data science, evidence of interdisciplinary research, meaning open to scientific problem, applicable, and focus on computational aspects is a plus. So we are thinking about strategic hiring, interplay between departmental strengths. I listed some of the departmental strengths on the right-hand side of the screen. We are interested in non-traditional hires, somebody who has expertise in computer science, somebody who has expertise in the field of science. We are sort of thinking of critical mass of the research, but also to broaden the field of expertise. And we are also interested in possible joint positions. Texas A&M will have opportunity for joint hires. This is not really optimal for the young faculty, new faculty, but for at the associate level and higher, we would be interested in such hirings. About these opportunities, tripods, which are led by our statistician, Bani Malik here, not many tripod institutes, which are NSF institutes in the nation, are led by statisticians. I believe this is second or third. And TAMITS, it is new Institute for Data Science at Texas A&M. Irina will tell a couple more words about those. Irina, you can take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brani. So I'm going to continue. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Statistics here at A&M, and I'm also the member of the hiring committee this season. So I would like to tell you a little bit more about A&M and the department at first, and then how does the hiring work? And finally, I would finish with some advice to the candidates. So first of all, if you're not familiar, Texas A&M University, as the name suggests, is in Texas. It's in the Bryan-College Station area of Texas. I remember when I was first moving to Texas, everyone was telling me that it's really, really tiny. But just to give you a perspective, Bryan-College Station area combined is 200,000 people, so it's not that small. And what you can see here is a bird's eye view from the campus. If you're not familiar with the geography, the Bryan-College Station is roughly in the middle of this triangle where the Dallas is at the top and Austin is Houston to the side. And if you're driving, it's around 1.5 hours to Austin, 1.5 hours to Houston, and 3 hours to Dallas. Texas A&M is a very research active university where in fiscal year 2019, it had almost $1 billion in research expenditures. And it's large. We have, I think, approximately 70,000 students now, which combines undergraduate, master, and PhD students. Now, as far as the Department of Statistics goes, we are a large department, so we have a larger faculty. Currently, we have 26 tenure track faculty and 11 instructional faculty. We have degrees, both bachelor's, or rather all three, bachelor's, master's, and PhD in statistics. We have an online master in statistics before online became popular pre-COVID, we have this degree for a long time. And we also have some forthcoming data science degrees in collaboration with other departments and Texas A&M Institute of Data Science that Bronnie has mentioned. So there's a lot of exciting opportunities in a lot of different areas of expertise. Are we hiring this season? We are. We have multiple tenure track assistant professor positions, as well as starting associate professor positions. As Bronnie has mentioned, all areas of research are welcome, but we're really interested in data science. So if there's evidence of interdisciplinary research and computational research, that's definitely a plus. Now, as far as the distinguishing characteristics goes, as everyone, we are looking for excellence in research, teaching, and service. But of course, because this is junior positions, what is really important is the demonstrated potential for excellence in those three areas. And research is the most important one, so that would be publications. And it's really nice when you see an applicant that has a healthy mix of statistics, machine learning, and methodology that is grounded in applications. For teaching, primarily we look whether there is any prior teaching experience and whether there is thoughtfulness, and I will elaborate what I mean by that a little bit later when I give specific advice. And of course, there would be not a lot of opportunities for junior candidates to have service, but still we'll look if there is any sign of professional activities, how collegial the person may be, and so forth. In terms of the deadlines, we have rolling review of applications. We have started reviewing applications already. We have new applications coming. We continue reviewing them, and we will continue to review them until the positions are filled. Now, did COVID change things? Not surprisingly, yes. Before we used to have one full day on site interviews, which was standard. Now we want to be flexible. So our first stage is to have an online talk via Zoom, and then have a hiring committee meeting also online. We want to be flexible in a second stage because the situation is changing all the time. And we feel like some of the candidates may feel disadvantaged if they cannot see the place where they want to come. So we want to give opportunity to have a physically distant on-site visit, but we are not gonna push the candidates to do that if for whatever logistical reasons are there. So this is the current plan. Again, the situation with COVID is evolving, but there's definitely a lot of things that are taking place online, which is a new challenge. Now, go into specific advice. And before I go there, I should highlight that this is my personal opinion. The opinion is formed as when I was a candidate on the market 6 years ago, as well as I had been on the hiring committee. I'm sure we have more opinions on the panel, so this is great. Kind of get the opinions you have and then decide what you need to do. So in terms of application materials, it's really nice if you have a website that has your picture on it. And one mistake that people make that I've seen is they put the website on the CV, but they don't make it clickable. And what typically happens is, depending on the application system that the departments are using to view those CVs, even if the website is there, but it's not clickable, what that means is it's likely not going to be clicked on. So just a minor point, make sure you have it, make sure it's clickable from your CV. Have a well-formatted CV. It's nice if your CV stands out, but sometimes if you use too many fonts, too many bold and gray and some strange formatting, it actually distracts from the main picture. So your CV should really focus on your academic accomplishments and be easy to read. It should be easy to see where are the publications, where is the teaching experience, any other activities. You don't want to lump unpublished research together with accepted manuscripts. You want to have them separately, because sometimes what happens is you see a list, let's say 8, but then as you read more carefully, you see this says submitted, so it's not been accepted. And that kind of makes it harder for the committee, and sometimes it does not leave a good impression. And the last advice is probably the most controversial. A lot of people tell not to spend any time on the teaching statement. I personally would say spend time on a personal teaching statement that has concrete examples, is not way over the top. Why do I give this advice? Because some committee members read it. I personally read teaching statements because that's typically where the candidates spend the least amount of time. So that's typically the best representation of how they can write and think. And sometimes they're teaching statements that have absolutely no concrete examples. And then it's really hard to justify whether you know what you're talking about. And sometimes the teaching statements are so way over the top that it's not very personal. So I would advise you spend some time on this highly neglected part of the application material. All right, now in terms of this COVID stuff, when you have an online interview talk, there is some advice that I think is common sense, but some you may not think about until you actually give a talk. So first of all, dress nice, fully, because you don't know. Maybe your dog is gonna bark and you have to leave the area and close the door or do something like that. Make sure to test your background, test your headset, make sure it's charged if you have a Bluetooth headset. Test the screen sharing, the technology platform. Maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's some other platform that you haven't used before. Turn off your phone. And what I would highly recommend, just to give less nervousness as you go through the interview, pre-open all the windows that you may want to see. Maybe you will need to have the browser where you share something later. Maybe you want to put some links in the chat. Have all of those open in advance and arranged. So as you go through your talk, if something happens, you don't have to rearrange the windows as you go. That just, I think, will make you feel more confident. Finally, beware of Zoom fatigue. That's a real thing. So I think it goes without saying that a good presentation has lots of pictures and color and font to convey the main message. But I think it's even more so when you give a presentation over Zoom, because it's really harder for people to stay attentive to what you're saying. Also, do not go over 45 minutes. Again, this is my personal opinion. I generally give this advice even when the talk is in person, but I think when it's in Zoom, people really start losing attention. So you really want to be as concise as possible. Again, personal opinion, do not try to cover all your papers. It's not possible for someone new to the field to understand 3 different papers in 45 minutes to an hour. I would suggest picking one story to tell, and maybe you have 2 papers that are really, really close, and then you can cover them together. But I would really pick one story that you can tell well, and then maybe end with 1-2 slides where you give overview of your general research. It's hard to engage the audience. Again, it's even harder online. Some strategies that I've seen sometimes work. They don't work all the time. It depends on the audience. But sometimes if you have some links in chat for people to look at, that keeps them more engaged. If you frequently remind the audience that they are welcome to ask questions, that sometimes generates more questions. Once I gave an online talk in the fall where I tried to ask questions myself. Now, this depends on your comfort level. If you're comfortable having some silence as you ask the question, you can do that, and that often encourages the audience to respond back. If you know that that would make you more nervous, then don't do it. Just kind of depends on where you're at. Meeting with faculty, this goes for both online or in person. I think most of them will be online. Be ready with a list of questions. I think the most common mistake that candidates do is they feel like everyone is going to ask them questions. Whereas in fact, a lot of times we expect questions from you because that means you thought of the position. What are some of the questions you can ask? There are a lot of common themes, such as graduate student support, what is their opportunity for interdisciplinary collaborations, fundings. It's a really good time to ask more about the city and activities and any other things that may be important for you geographically. And the mentoring mechanism, especially for junior hires. I would recommend asking the same questions more than once, multiple groups, so you can kind of see whether you get the same answers or maybe slightly different perspective on the same answers. And I would also recommend looking up people in advance, so you kind of know who is who in the department. And online, it gets a little bit easier because all of us have this little text under our window, which tells you who we are. So you will never forget. And if you have in advance, for example, who is the department head, who is the director of graduate studies, who are assistant professors, then you can tailor your questions a little bit better. Finally, some final thoughts. This is kind of towards the end of the process, but if you start receiving offers, I recommend notifying other places where you already interviewed or scheduled to interview that you have offers that you're receiving. That may promote the other place to move a little bit faster. However, do not use an offer as a bargaining chip. What I mean by that, do not get an offer just to get an offer. If you're not seriously considering it and then you're using it as a bargaining chip, that may work for you in a short term, but it's a very small world. So things spread. So don't do that. And of course, things are crazy with COVID. Every department tries to be as flexible as possible, and we're coming with new rules and strategies on how to do the hiring this season. But please don't hesitate to voice logistical considerations you may have. Maybe someone schedules your first online call at 8 a.m. Eastern time and you are in California. Don't hesitate to let the committee know that that's not going to work. Because honestly, if you are invited for an interview, that means the department wants to interview you. So if something like this comes up that for your personal situation with COVID, something does not make sense, don't hesitate to speak up. Finally, this is all of my presentation. The last thing I wanted to show is when I was on the market 5-6 years ago, I found that this was really overwhelming because there are a lot of things to take care of and a lot of things to think about. So one thing I did, following a friend of mine, Daniel McDonald, who did a similar document before, is I wrote a PDF kind of explaining my own personal opinion on the job market. And so if you want more advice, or if you think this will be helpful, I just wanted to quickly share it with you. So it's on my website. If you go to MISC, towards the end, there's a link to my perspective advice. If you're interested in this link, I'm going to put it in the chat. I think I have the chat window somewhere here. It needs to be updated with some of the things that changed as I became a member of the committee. But generally, I stand by most of the opinions that I have there. And of course, if you have any questions or you want to follow up on any of that, you are more than welcome to reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brenny and Irina. This is a very informative talk. So our next speaker will be Dr. Robert Crafty from Emory University. And so Dr. Crafty, please start sharing your screen.
Right, thank you. Let me just get my screen set up. Okay, is my screen working?
Yes.
Good. Great. So thank you for inviting me for this, and also thank you for putting on this workshop. I think it's going to be very helpful to potential applicants and just the bit broader community in general. So my name is Rob Crafty. I am chair and professor of the Department of Biostatistics and Bioinformatics at Emory University. And the way I want to kind of structure what I'm going to talk about today is first to introduce Emory, my department, talk more about the positions that we currently have open within the department, our strategy then for how we're going to approach hiring, and then just kind of talk about more broad advice about the hiring process in the field, both what you would expect during a normal time and then how that gets tweaked and uprooted in this very interesting time of the pandemic. Okay. So Emory University, it's located in sunny Atlanta, Georgia, which is the 9th largest metro area in the United States. If you look at kind of these two pictures, the bottom one is from Emory's campus on the outskirts. The top one is coming from the main quad angle of campus, and it looks over in the distance. You see Midtown and downtown Atlanta. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but if you squint enough right there in that building, if you look at the 21st floor of that building there, you probably see me in my home office talking to my computer screen. So Emory's campus, it's in the Druid Hills neighborhood. It's kind of has a suburban feel to it, but it's in the city and it's about 5 miles from Midtown and downtown. So Emory is a private university. We pull in 2020 about 831 million in federal funding, and it has 8 different schools to it. So the Department of Biostatistics is in the School of Public Health, which is part of the Woodruff Health Science Center. So the Woodruff family was very generous many years ago. Woodruffs were the former chairman of Coca-Cola and gave a wonderful endowment to create this comprehensive health science center at Emory University. Also at Emory, right next door is the CDC, Center for Disease Control. So there are lots of collaborations between the two. So the Department of Biostatistics at Emory is within the Rowland School of Public Health. The school consists of 6 departments and is currently 4th in the nation in terms of NIH funding. So there's a lot of very interesting work going on. So our department, we currently have 35 faculty members. That includes tenure track and non-tenure track, research track, and instructional faculty. Our department's current research expertise, it runs kind of the gambit of possible modern topics, including bioinformatics, machine learning, survival analysis, imaging, causal inference, and the whatnot. In terms of areas of applications, I was started to write things out on this slide as to all of our area of applications. And I realized if you can think of an area of application, it most probably is being looked at by a member of the department. But if I just highlight some of the biggest ones that have more comprehensive groups, vaccine evaluation, climate change, environmental health, and spatial statistics, mental and behavioral health, the omics of genetics, microbiome, neuroscience, and cancer are some of those that have very large, well-defined groups. In terms of our educational offerings, so the department does not have a bachelor's degree. We are mostly a graduate institution. The department has a PhD program and enrolls approximately 8 students per year, sometimes more. It's fairly unique in that all PhD students are fully funded, and they are fully funded with a 3-year graduate fellowship from the Laney School, which is Emory's School for Graduate Studies. And so they are not paid by assistantships in the first 3 years. They have a full fellowship for the first 3 years, which is a very nice and fairly unique aspect that allows the students to kind of grow into who they want to be as academics. Our alumni end up working in wonderful places in pharmaceutical industry such as Merck, biotechnology and information tech such as Google, government, and also in academia. Our proud alum are tenured and tenure stream faculty at places such as Duke and Yale. We also have 2 active master's programs, an MPH and an MSPH degree. The MSPH is something that is more akin to an MS degree in most statistics departments. The MPH has more of a applied public health tinge to it. And we get about 60 students per year between those two degrees combined. And lastly, we have a proposal for a Master's of Science in Public Health, which will be a degree program in our department in data science, as well as a certificate, which will be offered across, housed in our department, but offered throughout the entire university, which is just at the final stages of approval from the provost. All of the courses are going to be up and running, though, next year. So we have 3 positions open in our department. 2 are tenure track positions. So these positions are either at the assistant or associate level. The search committee will look for the best candidates. So we have an independent search committee that's reviewing the candidates, and they'll give their recommendation to me. But there are 2 particular areas of interest that we want to focus on. The first is applied machine learning and bioinformatics. And the second is infectious disease and spatial statistics. And so our reasons for focusing on these 2 are threefold. Number 1, there is a need for collaborative expertise across the university in these areas. We already have experts in both of these areas, but we need more. There's also a need in terms of teaching and mentoring students in these areas. And there are also areas where we have projected where we would like to move further as a department. So in terms of expectations of a tenure track faculty member within the department, typically you teach 1 graduate course per year. And for junior individuals coming in, the startup package, this is negotiable in the very beginning. You're expected to develop and lead a methodological research program. You're expected to develop collaborations which are related to your methodological interest. And you're expected to eventually grow into being able to mentor students, both masters and PhDs. So in addition to the tenure stream position, we also currently have an open research track position. So this position is the individual will be expected to become a lead applied statistician working in HIV studies and also in studies that deal with longitudinal and clinical trial data. This individual will also be expected to work partially through the Biostatistics Consulting Center, which is a center housed within the department that provides consulting service across the university. This individual will also teach about 1 graduate course per year and is expected to eventually mentor graduate students with a particular emphasis on helping to mentor graduate students in terms of collaborative biostatistics. So our department takes very seriously that graduate students, especially master's students, who when they graduate, many want to have applied jobs, should receive comprehensive applied practical training. So our planned process for how we're going to hire this year. First, we've already started reviewing applications for both positions, but you can still apply. We have a rolling basis of evaluating. I anticipate that initial invitations for the tenure track position are expected for early January, and that the research track position might be potentially sooner. So in terms of how the interview process is going to work, it's similar to what the previous speakers from Texas A&M mentioned, is that first round of interviews will be remote. And so this is to reduce traffic coming through the school and university. Although I should note that our school, the School of Public Health, had 30% in-person instruction this past semester, which is, I think, unique in that we had more potential in-person contact. But to the best of my knowledge, we've only had 2 positive cases that did not spread to anyone within the school because protocols were followed very well. You'll give a remote seminar over Zoom. You'll also then meet with department faculty, students, and any potential collaborators that you would like to speak to remotely via Zoom. Now, that's kind of the things I know for sure. However, how the best format and everything will shake out is still being determined. So the previous speakers mentioned this idea of flexibility and wanting to work with everyone to find things that will work best for people. We're trying very hard on that as well. So questions such as how many hours per day? So most traditional interviews, not during a pandemic, you arrive to the university, it's a day and a half or 2-day affair where they run you all day meeting with people and whatnot. That clearly will not be a good option in this Zoom era. I can't think of anything worse than a 12-hour Zoom day. How many days do we want to spread this over? Would it be more effective to have more group meetings rather than one-on-ones to kind of mitigate this Zoom fatigue that people might be having? So then after the first round of interviews, potential for later in-person interviews. Now, this is up to everyone's comfort level and for everyone's safety. So our school has been, some of my colleagues in other departments within the school who have earlier hiring cycles have already brought people in for in-person second rounds. Some had candidates who accept it without even coming in for in person because they felt more comfortable. So if you were to come in for an in-person, it would be to see the department and buildings, although you won't get the vibe of what it's like during a normal period with people all around because no one will be around. Well, very few people will be around, but you can see the campus, get a feeling for the environment, and also get a feeling for the city. So I want to then switch and give some broader advice about and insights about the academic job market, especially now during the pandemic. And to understand where my comments are coming from, I'll just give you a little background of where I'm coming from. So I've listed my educational experiences and my past academic jobs. I'm posting this to note that I've had kind of a diverse career thus far, being in colleges of arts and sciences, schools of medicine, schools of public health, and business schools. So the comments I'm going to make are kind of broad as to different types of academic jobs. Something else to note is that I just started at Emory in September. And so what this means is I moved smack dab in the middle of a pandemic. So I can also provide advice, not just as a chairman of a department who's hiring during a pandemic, but as someone that went through this process myself. Now, your process for those who are looking for jobs right now will be different than mine in that I was able to give an on-site in-person interview in February right before things shut down. And so I had the advantage of at least being able to see people face to face to get a feeling for the environment. And then I eventually went then for a second on-site interview in June. And in between those two visits was a whole lot of Zoom calls. So I want to talk about kind of a couple of main points that I think of that you should think about when looking for jobs. So the first one is really think about what you want. So remember that you as a candidate have a lot to offer. So I find, especially with individuals who are looking for their first job or fairly junior, that there can often be this feeling of, I just want a job, any job. Remember that this is part of you growing your career and your future, and you have a lot to offer. So really think about what it is that you want both out of your career and out of your life. I find that the two come hand in hand, and if you're not happy in general life, you won't have a happy and successful career. So now in normal times, what are some things to think about? Number one, how much and do you want to teach? So I'm coming from the Department of Biostatistics, where teaching one class a year is normal. For individuals who are in departments of statistics, it's traditionally 3 classes a year if you're in a big R1, and some maybe even 4 a year or higher. So think about how much and do you want to teach? Also think about where you want your research voice to be on the continuum of theory, methods, and applications. Think about geographical restrictions or preferences. Are you someone who living in a major city with smog and traffic sounds horrific, or are you someone who thinks that that sounds like paradise? Do you have a family restriction where your spouse, let's say, works on Wall Street, and so you can't leave the New York metropolitan area? Ask yourself, do you work best in a small or large department? Now, during the pandemic, how do these change? Well, I think the biggest one is questions such as geography might become much more complicated. Do you want to move? Can you move? Is what you actually want out of life now the same as what you want out of life 2 years from now, where hopefully things are opened up and back to whatever our new normal is going to be? And so I'd encourage you to consider now, but also think towards the future. So for instance, if you have some sort of, you're uncomfortable moving this summer for whatever reason, or if you have a family restriction, as you yourself or a family member has a very high pre-existing condition that you don't feel comfortable moving this summer, be open and then also speak with a department as to if maybe moving later and working remotely could be an option. Now, then the question is, should you go for it? So you kind of thought about what you want and you see some positions. The question is, should you go for it? So first thing is, if a position's not right for you, don't apply. If you TA'd courses as a graduate student and you realize you hate teaching, don't go to apply to a department where there's a 2-2 teaching load. Similar with collaborating. And if there's a location where you would be miserable in, even if it's the best, the highest ranked university everywhere, anywhere, think about if that's the right place for you to apply. Now, in normal times, if the position looks like it's right fit for you, jump on it and apply. Get over fear and apply. I also would encourage you to talk to mentors, colleagues, and others to kind of learn more about the place and its environment. We're a very small and friendly field. People are willing to help. And so don't be afraid to reach out. Now, during the pandemic, I think this uncertainty, kind of fear and hesitation is heightened. If you think it's right, go for it. Utilize your network even more. So what I found, especially during my trying to move during the pandemic, is that there's a little bit more iteration back and forth when it comes to emails and Zooming. It's maybe not as efficient as if you can have a face-to-face, one-on-one to just hammer out some things. So I encourage you then to open up your network more, to talk more to more individuals so that you can understand positions better. And think about if you are comfortable in terms of in-person visits. If you get an interview, be open with the search committee as to how you feel about this. If you're comfortable going on campus, yes or no. If you really are not comfortable moving to a place if you haven't seen it before. So every institution has different rules, but my impression is that almost all of them are interested in making this a smooth process for you. Now, what are they looking for when you're being interviewed or when you're sending an application? So from the perspective of our department, our main thing is we look at your current and or potential, depending on your level of seniority, for producing high quality, impactful, independent research. And what is your level of scientific and technical rigor? Another question is, do you know who you are or who you want to be as a scholar? So Irina was talking a lot about kind of having kind of succinct, clear material. That goes to this idea of, do you have an idea of who you are that you can succinctly say, this is the type of work I want to do and who I want to be or who I am? Of course, we look at how good are you at communicate as in terms of communication. Are you excited to join a department? And then also, will you be successful or happy there? Oh, sorry. I guess I'm getting the red light, so I will finish it up quickly. Now, during the pandemic, search committees will be looking at all these things. So they're going to try to help you, try to help them. So this means practice your Zoom session, make sure you're in a quiet environment. And if your room's messy, find a fun Zoom background. And then I'll just very quickly go over, also think about what you want to be looking for in a department. Remember that they're interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. So think about and ask them about their teaching loads, funding expectations, path to promotions. If you're junior, your level of mentorship. So thank you for letting me just present my views on this academic job search. And for those of you that are on the market, I wish you the best of luck.
For your very informative talk, Robert. And so we're going to move on to our last speaker. So Dr. Martin Wells from Cornell University. Please share your screen, Martin.
Thank you for inviting me to talk today about looking for a job during this pandemic. The job search process is complicated. It's a little bit more complicated during the pandemic. Just sort of trying to. Is this all working now? I want to be sure.
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you.
So one of the first lessons is to be sure you know how to use Zoom, and this is a perfect example of that. So what I said, thank you for hosting this today. We have been searching for candidates for many years in our department, and I just want to talk a little bit about about our department and sort of what we're looking for, and what my thoughts are about how you can be successful. So our department is now called Statistics and Data Science. We were originally a department called Department of Statistical Science. Before that, we had various names, and now we're a single department that spans across Cornell. So we have some unique administrative structure, but we're the department that essentially is statistics and data science. We're really trying to branch out into data science. A lot of what the current faculty do are connected to more traditional statistics, but we hired last year, and we had somebody that's more of works on the mathematics of data science. So we're sort of moving in that direction. This year, we're sort of looking at all types of candidates, but we're not necessarily looking at data science explicitly. We just want to have strong candidates. So Cornell is a beautiful campus, and you see these nice pictures. We see, on sunny days, it's nice and sunny and clear, and you can see a lake just beyond the campus. The bottom pictures are what it looks like today. We had some snow last night, so it can actually get a bit cold, which adds to the charm of the place. We're looking for multiple candidates this year. We have at least 2 junior positions, junior being assistant professor, possibly more senior assistant professor, or even associate professor, a new associate professor. We're also doing a chair search this year, so I think that's a bit of a different process. The size of our department, we have a number of adjuncts and people with different connections to the department. We have 18 overall faculty, tenured and tenure track professors. We have lecturers, and we have a sizable graduate program. We have a professional master's program, and we have a growing undergraduate program. Cornell is in this really idyllic area in upstate New York. We're not really close to the city. We're sort of in between, say, Toronto and New York City, right in the middle of the state. It's quite beautiful. It's a small town. It's a small town that's quite cosmopolitan. So it has the feel of, there's a lot of activities that a city would have, but there's a lot of outdoor activities, right? So it's really quite nice. We're not too far from New York City. We're a 4-hour drive from New York City and we're close to Toronto. There's easy ways to get out of Ithaca, but it's quite a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful campus. You know, what we have to think about is that, you know, what is a department looking for, right? So what I want to talk a little bit about is that, you know, what we're looking for, and how do you get in the door? So one of the things, there's sort of two steps of the process. There's the, you know, getting your application to the committees and having the committees select you. But then once you go through that selection process, you know, what happens on the interview. We'll talk about that next. But, you know, what we're looking for is really strong research contributions, right? So that's where we're a research university, and so we have expectations that the faculty will be doing research and publishing in the leading journals. You know, how do we assess that, you know, coming right in the beginning? So we look at the cover letter, we read your cover letter, we look at your statements, we look at your website. A lot of times people think that their CV has all the information. We look at a lot of different information. You read your statements closely, and we look at your personal website. And you should think about using all these pieces of information as a strategy. They don't, you know, they can reveal different aspects of what your skill set is. And so you shouldn't just rely on the CV, and be very clear in your research statement is what you want to do, right? So don't be vague, be very clear about where you want to go into the future. We look at the letters. The letters are very important, right? So you want to be sure that your advisor is very clear about what your research contributions are. And if you select other faculty members to write letters, you should talk to them about, you know, what aspects that you want them to cover. You know, is it more about your teaching, or is it more about collaborations, right? So be sure that your letters are very clear and effective. I think that they're very important. In your statements, you know, you should be clear about how you would connect to the department faculty, right? So a department has lots of faculty. You don't have to connect everybody. One thing you want to be sure is that if you're going to mention that you want to work with a particular faculty member in the department, in your cover letter, be sure that you mention their current research rather than past research. Oftentimes we'll get letters or cover letters that say, I would like to work with Professor X on some topic, but that was a topic that Professor X worked on in the 80s. Right? So you want to kind of be very clear and straightforward about you know, what you want to do, who you want to work with. Teaching's a bit more difficult to assess. I mean, people haven't had that much teaching experience. They may have TA'd, maybe have done some classroom teaching, right? But we really look at the teaching statement, diversity statements, to highlight your experience. The teaching statement is very important. As Irina mentioned, you spend a lot of your time teaching, right? So we want people to actually think about how they envision that time in their career. We're also looking for people to make impact. We look for department people that have they'll be good citizens. That's a bit harder that's hard to assess, but it's something that you should try to reflect in your statements. You know, it's really important. Collegiality is very, very important, and it's something that you don't think about when you're a junior scholar, but being a collegial member of the department, willing to do service is quite important. So we want to be sure that when we're looking for people, we want to see that people would have a sense of you know, how they can fit into the team. How we're going to structure the interviews is that we're going to have 3 rounds. We're going to have a first screening round. There'll be a shorter interview. You'll talk to the search committee about what your research is, and a brief presentation. But it'll be you know, an hour or so interview. The second round will be a little bit more intense. It'll be a half day or so interview. That's where you'll give your job talk. You'll meet with groups of faculty and groups of students, and so we'll use that as sort of the research assessment time, and it's with other meetings. And then we're going to have a third round, and it may be a bit longer, and we'll have we'll have fewer candidates. One of the issues about Ithaca, it's hard to get to Ithaca on a good day. The flights are delayed in the winter. It can also be difficult. So we're not going to even really going to think about on-campus interviews because it's just hard to get there. I think we can do well with the Zoom interviews. I think once the offer process happens, we can try to that will be later on in the spring, and we could have on-campus interviews if you're considering offers. A really important, so once you've sort of got on the radar of the search committee, and you get the interview, then you're on campus, and you have to, how does that going to play out? And that your talk and your meetings are very important. Particularly your talk is important. People really do is quite an evaluation of a lot of aspects of what you're doing in your talk. And so you really need to be quite prepared. And it's maybe not fair that so much is laid on to the talk, but it's just the way it is. Right? So, you have to be very clear in your talk about what you've done, what your research question is, and what are your primary contributions to that research. And you want to be able to explain how your research fits into a literature. And so sometimes people are assigned a problem to work on, and they're working on that problem, and they may not have a view of how it fits into a bigger literature. And so you'll be asked about that. And so you want to have a very clear view, and it's helpful to have that as part of your presentation. One thing people have a tendency to sort of put just a lot of technical things in their slides and their presentation, and you don't need to do that. You can use your website. You can refer to papers and a lot of the technical details, which you may have found very interesting and important. They just don't fit as well into a presentation, so you have to be able to refer to the other material, and so doesn't clutter up your slides. You have to be very clear also about where you think you're going to go, right? So you want to say what your near-term research agenda is. You don't have to have a long-term agenda, but you have to sort of think about what your next steps are. So you have to articulate what you're doing, how it fits in, and then where it's actually going. One of the more complicated issues is that how do you decide how to be broad, how to be narrow? One thing, you have to be able to just explain your research to a broad community. Right? It turns out that your audience will probably be quite mixed, and that's how it is at Cornell. We have graduate students, we have faculty, but we do a lot of collaborations with faculty in other departments, or graduate students in other departments, and postdocs in other departments. So we'll have experts and non-experts in the room. So you have to be able to give a high enough level picture for the experts, but give enough detail for the more applied people to understand. So I think what that will show, if you strike this balance, is it will really show that you've sort of thought about your presentation, and it really gets at, that are you going to be an effective teacher? I think being able to put teach at these different levels is just very important, and giving that presentation that can do that is really reflective of your skills as a teacher. Right? So don't be afraid to kind of prompt questions during the talk. Be sure that people are listening. You have to sort of maybe elicit a response, and maybe ask rhetorical questions. Be sure that people are listening, are engaged. And when people ask questions, don't give too detailed, don't get stuck in a detailed conversation. If it gets too complicated that you think it should be taken offline, take it offline. So the tips for Zoom interviews is that you have to really practice. And the first thing is you practice. Give your talk many times. Be sure you understand the technology. One thing I've found that I'm on a lot of Zoom calls. Be sure you're looking into the camera. Make sure that that people can see you. You're not looking down. People can see your eyes. So look into the camera. Important thing is to have a way to write during your interview. People might ask a question. In a in-person interview, you can write on the board. You can't do that on Zoom. So be sure you have a whiteboard available. Have a good, nice background, bright room, quiet space. Be sure your laptop battery doesn't go dead. Be sure your updates are fine. So a lot of these details that you need to be aware of. Be sure that you sort of tend to these. They're small things, but they give impressions. And so, we all know that this is complicated. We all appreciate that this interaction over Zoom is suboptimal, and we're all dealing with it. And we're dealing with it. I know it's hard for the candidates. It's hard for the faculty. We all know it's a problem. So I think we're all trying to be patient during this. And I think the interviewees and the interviewers are kind of muddling through this. And we all understand it's difficult. Again, in your interview, you're going to be asked technical questions. So be sure you have a way of writing those down. It's quite important. Another piece of advice is that, be sure that you, when you're during the interview, that the faculty where you're interviewing know that you're interested in the position. That you're just not going through the motions, right? So be sure that you demonstrate interest. Do some homework about the faculty in the department, right? Be familiar with what their research is. Don't know all the details, but be sure you have some sense of what they're doing. Don't be afraid to ask lots of questions, right? And ask the same question to lots of people, and you'll probably get lots of different answers. And you may find that confusing, but ask the search committee for clarity. If you're confused about something, try to get answers. I think that you will get different answers on things, but ask for some clarity. Be very consistent in your answers, because when people talk about, after the interview, people say, well, what did the candidate say about X, Y, or Z? And we want to know that the answers were consistent. Ask about what it's like to live in the town. Living in Ithaca is quite unique. And that's very different than, say, living in Atlanta or Texas A&M. One thing you should also do is use your networks. Right? So your advisor or other faculty have quite sizable networks. So we're a small community. We want to be sure that you can use those connections for your job search, and they can also help you to plan and strategize for the interview, because they'll probably know something about the individuals in the department. After you receive an offer, here's some advice. Just be very transparent about what your needs are, what salary you want, what your startup needs are. It just doesn't help to let the chairman or the person writing the offer play a guessing game. You just be very clear about this. We sort of all have a sense of what the going salaries are, and we want to recruit people, so we're trying to give the highest possible salary. And we want to be sure that you can do your research, so we'll do our best to meet your startup needs. Be very transparent about the timing of other offers. We can, if you have another offer and there's a deadline, let us know, let the chair know. We can't guess. We can only help you. We can only try to resolve conflicting offers or timing issues if we have information. If you have multiple offers, decline one if you're not interested in the position. And as Irina said, it's a small community, and it's quite annoying when you're in a search process, you're trying to recruit excellent people, and if a chair feels that a candidate's freezing the process in order to get leverage, it's just a bit annoying. Other thing is that most universities work hard to meet the needs of dual careers. Cornell has a dual career program office, and when you're comfortable talking about dual careers with the chair or the committee, do that, because we can only be proactive if we have information. It's difficult to work out a dual career issues if it only comes up right at the very end of the offer process, right? So we're very sensitive to this in Ithaca. It's a smaller town. We're not in a big city, so the job possibilities are limited by it being in a small town. And so we can only help you be very proactive if we have information early on. That's all. So good luck, and I hope that you do well on the job market.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you to all the speakers for their wonderful talks. So now it is time for the Q&A. Before we start the Q&A, I want to specifically thank Dr. Linzhou Xue for organizing this session, for putting us together to give this informative career fair to our audience. So far I cannot see questions on my end. If you can use the Q&A function to pose your questions, that would be great. So maybe I can open up the Q&A by asking the first question. So to all our speakers, what do you think will be the major difference in your evaluation during this pandemic compared to before pandemic hiring? Maybe we can start from Irina and Brenny.
Sure. So honestly, I think we're still evaluating on the same things. Like what we're looking for in a candidate has not changed. We're looking at the letters, we're looking at the CV, we're looking at the statements, we're looking how well they can present the research. So I don't think anything really has changed from that perspective. I think we're more aware of logistical issues that may happen. And if anything, it's maybe a little bit harder to evaluate because you don't see people in person as easily right away. But we're still looking for the same things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yes, I would just add that this pandemic affected more candidates than the evaluators, because we can pretty much evaluate almost completely the candidate via Zoom and via material that is submitted. But the candidate does not have that sort of privilege to evaluate us as it is when they visit and spend some time at the place, to see the department, to see the city. So it is more affecting the candidates than the universities.
That's a very good point. Thank you for your answer. Robert, would you like to add something to that?
So I agree completely. And I think, we've hit on that when you think about the 3 areas of evaluation. You have to hit teaching, research, and service. I think it's at least from our department, evaluating that service department of how much do you want to be a member of the department. And, departments and universities are officially run by their faculty senate. So we are running the departments in schools. It's harder for us to evaluate that part when we can't be one-on-one and having lunch with someone.
Definitely, I see. Yeah. So Martin, what do you think?
I agree with all that was said. And the one thing that comes out in the complexity of the Zoom world is, what we found is that people have some extra skills. They can actually shine by showing that they know how to give presentations on Zoom. And we had an issue about how we're going to evaluate teaching in this pandemic time over Zoom. Some people really did an excellent job. I think they showed their skill set, and I think that they can show things that they couldn't show in a usual type of interview.
That's a very good point too. Yeah. So there are advantages and disadvantages, and our candidates should leverage the advantages to show their more skills. Okay, we have 4 questions now, or 5 questions in Q&A. So the first one is from Zhang Zhang, who asked, could you explain more about dual career couples or dual career program?
So at Cornell, as I said, we live in a small town, and so if one person is interviewing and we want to make an offer, and their partner has a certain career, the Cornell will help be the employment agency essentially. If the person is a faculty member, and we'll work with other departments. So last year, we actually had a couple of people that we made offers to, and we worked with other departments, and we constructed 2 tenure track lines in the other departments. But this takes time. And so another candidate told us about their dual career issue after we've sort of negotiated fairly far into the offer, and we just couldn't do anything. We just didn't have time because they had time constraints, and then we had to also try to work out dual career issues, and it was difficult. And so I think, particularly for Cornell, it's different because we're in a small town, that more information, the better. But that said, we don't want to, make you uncomfortable talking about your situation, but it's an issue that we have to deal with. And so, as a chair, my assumption is there's always going to be a dual career issue, and then we have to kind of deal with it from there.
Mm-hmm. That is very friendly.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So just for the candidates to be aware, I don't know if anyone aware, the search committee is not allowed to ask you about your family status and your occupation. But if you're a female candidate, you still will be asked, because that happened to me. So they're not allowed to ask, but they may still ask. You shouldn't freak out if that happens, but it may happen. Just something to keep in mind. For some reason, females get asked more than males.
Right. But also to stay in the context, at Texas A&M, at the dean of faculty, there is somebody who is really concerned about dual careers, and that is solved at the level of university, not only the chairs, but at the levels of university. They have bridge funds for 2 or 3 years that they make for departments quite easy and inexpensive to hire the spouse or better half.
And if the spouse is not in academia, there's still resources that are offered with resume, CV, and finding a job within the community.
Yes.
Thank you, Brian.
If I could quickly add, so Irina brought up a great point, is that, in these interviews, legally, the people interviewed should not ask you about your family life. But I encourage you, if you're comfortable and you do have a two-body problem, where your kids go to school is going to be a consideration. If you're comfortable to bring that up, I found that most places, if they're interviewing you, they want you. They're interested in you and they want to make it work. And they realize that you're not just a robot and that you're going to be coming here to live and be happy. And they want to make sure that that can work.
Yeah, that's a very good point too. Okay, thank you all for the answers to the first question. The second question is from Ethan Alt. What is the best way to sell yourself when your papers are not yet published? Very, very challenging question.
That is a very hard one.
Yeah.
Sorry, another personal opinion. When I was on the market 5 or 6 years ago, I actually did not have published papers. I was coming straight from PhD. And I believe the recommendation letters is what actually made it happen. But for the 5 last years, we have more and more postdoctoral candidates. And so I think honestly, it's much, much harder now if you don't have published papers. The best thing you can do is have very strong recommendations. That's my opinion.
So I agree fully and completely. So number one, utilize the archive to get your work out there so people can read it. The letters of recommendation are very, very important. And this is a problem in our field when you have papers that take 2 to 3 years under review, have never been rejected from a journal, but still take 2 to 3 years under review. And I also agree with Irina that given this current kind of market, if you don't have any papers yet, accept it. It might behoove you to think about further training before a faculty position.
I agree with the letters. That's critical. That's why I wrote a strong letter for Irina actually during this situation. So and I think that, you know, the letters are important. The social networks are important. You know, that if your advisor can be your advocate, I think that's a very important, if you don't have papers. It's also a timing issue. You know, if you did, as Ria said, if you have a postdoc, that you should be getting, have some publications. But if you know, evaluators can see potential. If the papers that are unpublished are very good and very strong, you know, you can see that. But it's really a timing issue that you have to deal with, and the reviews are just too slow, and that really hurts the candidates.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for the answers. This third question is from Sharon Hanuk. And the question is, any good advice for international applications? I would assume that it means the applicants are outside of the United States.
Actually, the international applicants have just the same ability to zoom in as the non-international candidates. So I don't think I think they're in the same situation as the domestic candidates.
Yeah, especially this year.
Yeah, but also be clear about timing. Be sure that, you know, if they're 12 hours away, be sure that the timing, the interview is scheduled appropriately, so they're not disadvantaged by the timing.
Irina, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that sometimes it's hard for us to know where the applicant is at the time the interview is scheduled. So if there is a time consideration, like Marty has mentioned, then you should absolutely let the committee know. Again, it goes with what Rob was also saying, that if you are invited for an interview, we want to interview you. So if what we're proposing doesn't work because of time issues, then we want to change that so it works.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for the answers. Next question from Selena Wang. Are there thresholds for number of publications and manuscripts needed to get an interview?
So I think there tends not to be, you know, because there's a big difference between quantity and quality and depth. people, I can write 1 million papers and maybe send them to places that I paid them to publish, and I have a long CV. But in terms of being able to create long-lasting, important, deep scholarship, that could just be one very good paper that sets the stage. So at least from my perspective, there definitely is no cutoff for that.
So do other panelists agree?
Yeah, definitely no cutoff.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, next question from Tian Tian Yang. Thank you for all the great information. Here I have a question. Will a postdoctoral position be beneficial to get a tenure track position at a university than a fresh PhD graduate? That's a very great question. So any advice?
I can try to go on it.
Yes.
So I think if you don't have papers and you're a fresh PhD graduate, given the current market, you would have a really hard time. And so in that case, I think you should definitely go for a postdoctoral position, so you can build up your portfolio.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if you have spent years in a postdoctoral position, then there is an expectation of a certain number of papers. And so you cannot afford to have an unproductive postdoctoral position. So I think there are pros and cons to both, my personal opinion.
Some
Yes.
postdoctoral positions come with duties. So, I can imagine somebody gets a big NIH grant, they write in a postdoc, and then there's a lot of data analysis duties that go with that postdoc position. If those don't align with your other research, it can become problematic because you don't get a chance to finish the existing, your previous projects, and then you're halfway into another set of projects, and those aren't completed either. So I think if you take a postdoc, you should be very deliberate about which ones you take, and be clear about what the expectations are for that postdoc.
And also, if I can add, if you are taking postdoc position, don't stay postdoc too long. After 3 years, people would ask why this person stay 4, 5, 6 years as a postdoc. Optimal would be 2, 3 years.
Yeah, as a follow-up question, actually, I think it just occurred to me. Do you think it is preferred that if a PhD student chose to do postdoc with a different advisor at a different institution compared to working with his or her PhD advisor for a longer time? I've seen both.
It seems depends what your research goals are. I mean, it should again align with what you want to do in research. If you want to completely switch areas, and that the postdoc advisor is doing something quite different, there's a bit of a startup cost.
Yep.
For moving into a new area. So again, it's part of what your vision is and what your short-term goals are, and you want to make decisions whether it's going into a tenure track position or a visiting position or a postdoc that sort of align with those goals.
Yeah. Thank you for your answers. And
Can I add something? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
I think assuming for the candidate's perspective, you don't have logistical considerations. One advantage of doing a postdoc and going and doing it with someone else is that you enlarge your network, which kind of makes you more known, which I think is a definite plus. You also get to see how someone else is doing things more. So you get to cross-compare more different environments, which may help you when you actually do go on the academic job market to have more wisdom in deciding what is the type of an environment that you would be most happy in. So there are those advantages for sure.
And if I can add one more thing, I was on many times at Georgia Tech in the college committee for promotion and tenure. And sometimes when candidates coming for the promotion stay and publish only with the advisor for years, is looked negatively. So it is expected that you become on your own, that maybe you make your own niche of research, and that you show that independence in your publications.
Mhm.
So postdoc is great for that, and changing things are really great.
And actually, if I can, slightly off topic, but following up on Brian's comment, so that's very true that, when you become evaluate for tenure and promotion, that they're looking at you as an independent scholar.
Yep.
And if your advisor or postdoc mentor is seen on all of your papers, then that's kind of questioned. And I encourage people to actually have that conversation with your mentor and postdoc advisors, to have an open and candid conversation about your path to independence. So I know lots of people in our field have the best of intentions, but maybe are not thinking about their mentee and candidates progression throughout by having their name still on papers with them.
That's a very good point. Thank you all for your answers. Our next question from Amanda Tapia. Is there any difference in how you would evaluate a candidate coming from a postdoctoral position versus coming straight from a PhD program? I think we had a little answer for that, right, already, but would you like to add more to answer this specific question?
So I would say, aside, I think we talked about, you'd expect it to have at least a paper, a few more papers. I think in addition to that, you're expected to know more about who you want to be as a scholar, a little more as to where your vision is, as to where you will be as an independent researcher. So both on paper, a few more publications, things are already printed, but also a little bit more of maturity as to where you're going to be as an independent researcher.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer, Robert. Okay.
And we had this discussion as well. So to second, if you're a postdoctoral researcher, we expect some publications to be there, and we would not expect to see the same numbers for someone who is coming fresh from PhD versus someone who spent time doing postdoc.
And I think a criteria maybe many departments use is the year after PhD. Is that right? We will see when you obtain your PhD degree and try to compare your productivity in relation to that.
There's a little bit harder, just because one caveat is sometimes you see candidates who had some industry experience in between, and then you understand that there will be slightly different requirements. But generally, that's another route. And that's, I think, going back to, you don't want to be a postdoc for 6 years, because then people will be asking why.
Yeah. Okay, our last question here from Chang Hee Cho. What are the things that the search committees want to figure out from a candidate during the initial Zoom and on-site interviews? I don't think we have on-site this year, right? It will still be probably a longer Zoom interview. Is there a clear difference? Does the department have specific criteria? I think this candidate, this question was asking about departments that have more than one round of interview.
I think that for us, we're just looking, to get a sense of clarifying, what the written documents were about. I think that's what comes out in the shorter interview, and to kind of, there'll be pointed questions that kind of are trying to assess questions about, whether this person should go on to the next round. I think it's more of a clarifications.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we're very right on time. Now it's 10:30 here in California. So do we have further questions from the audience? Oh, yeah, one more, sorry. And from James Matuk, is it a good idea to apply for both postdoc and tenure track positions within the same department?
So I think it depends. Different departments operate differently in how they view and receive postdoc and tenure track applications. So I know in my department, main departments of biostatistics, the postdoc applications will not be seen by the tenure track faculty position committees and vice versa. And so applying to both would essentially, no one would really know it. Often though, when we're reviewing applications in the tenure track committee, if you see real potential in this individual, but you're like, it's not quite there yet, and you want to make sure that they're able to have more time to mature, to make sure that when they hit their faculty position, that they'll be completely successful. Then they might email and send that application to a colleague who has an open postdoc.
Yeah.
The postdocs are usually to collaborate with an individual, because they're usually not departmental postdocs. So it could just be different. There's also visiting positions that, we have a position, the Jacob Wolfowitz position. So it's not a postdoc, you teach courses. It's not tenure stream, but has a little bit less teaching. And so, there's different types of positions, but it's a bridge between tenure stream and a postdoc, but it gives people a bit more time to get some research done without being involved with the obligations of a postdoc.
I would agree with you, and I would say that it is not a good idea to apply for both at the same time.
Okay, I think we have answered all the questions in the Q&A, and I would like to thank all our speakers for their informative talks and very detailed instructions to our applicants. This is super helpful for junior candidates. And I would just say that all the recording and the slides will be available on the NISS website. So if you want to share this information with your colleagues or friends, please feel free to do so. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance. And so we look forward to seeing you in person in the future.
Great. So Jessica, James, and Glenn, and Nis, thank you for putting this on. I think this is a great service to the community.
Completely agreed, Robert.
Second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Everyone.